Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something that affects millions of people, yet it's still so deeply misunderstood: depression. We're going to completely demystify this condition, bridging the gap between what a person feels internally, that really heavy, deeply personal experience, and the objective, clinical benchmarks that doctors actually use to make a diagnosis. So if you've ever wondered where normal, everyday stress ends and a true medical condition begins, well, you're exactly where you need to be.
To get us there, here's our roadmap. We'll start with the core emotional symptoms, move right into the cognitive and physical toll, explore the extreme edges of depression, break down the three main diagnostic criteria, and finally, talk about exactly when it's time to seek help.
Let's kick things off with part 1, the core emotional symptoms, and validating that internal experience.
These are those early warning signs that really start to drag down the mind and the body. We're looking at fatigue, a depressed mood, and a total loss of interest. Now, these three symptoms basically strip away the joy of everyday normal life. Picture a totally healthy person heading to work. They might be excitedly thinking about lunch, maybe grabbing a limited edition coffee, or just vibing to new music on the train. But for someone slipping into a depressive state, there's just this crushing, persistent heaviness. It's like wearing a lead suit. The physical body literally feels heavy. Even something as simple as getting ready in the morning or putting on makeup suddenly feels like an impossible, monumental task.
And you know, a seemingly simple interaction can actually mask a devastating internal spiral. Imagine a friend invites you to play a brand new video game you used to absolutely love, and you just respond with, "No thanks, I don't care about games anymore." From the outside, it just looks like you're declining an invite. But internally, the person is completely spiraling. They lose interest in their passions, and then their brain convinces them, "Oh, my friend definitely hates me now because I blew them off. I really need to apologize." But the fatigue is so incredibly deep, they physically cannot bring themselves to make that apology.
Which brings us to part 2, the cognitive and physical toll, or the escalation of the illness.
Because that heavy emotional baseline doesn't just sit quietly in the background. It actually begins to physically break down a person's cognitive functions and bodily rhythms. This thought, "My head isn't working, this is an impossible amount of work," perfectly captures the fourth symptom: agitation and restlessness. Imagine being at the office and your boss asks you to update some data, check an email draft, and fix a document. For a healthy brain, hey, that's just a normal Tuesday. But in a depressive state, it triggers intense internal panic. The tasks pile up, the brain gets completely fogged over, and the person is left feeling absolutely frantic.
And that leads right into the fifth symptom, a severe drop in thinking and concentration. The progression here is honestly pretty tragic. In the early stages, the brain actually tries to overcompensate. The person tries way too hard, overworking themselves, pushing far, far past their natural limits just to keep up. But eventually, the system just crashes. The mind essentially stops working altogether. They can't make even the simplest decisions about what to do first, and they're left just spinning their wheels, completely helpless and paralyzed.
So, a really crucial point regarding symptoms 7 and 8 is this wild paradox of physical manifestations. We almost always picture depression as a physical deficit, right? Someone who can't sleep, lying awake with racing thoughts, or losing a ton of weight without even trying. But it's vital to know that the exact opposite is just as true. Depression can totally trigger physical excesses. Some people might aggressively overeat to cope, or find themselves sleeping way too much, barely able to wake up at all.
Let's move into part 3, the extremes of depression, exploring the darkest symptoms.
If this condition continues to escalate unchecked, we hit the most severe and dangerous symptoms. This is where the internal monologue turns ruthlessly punishing. We're talking about the 6th symptom: feelings of utter worthlessness and intense guilt. Look at how warped reality becomes here. The person doesn't just feel sad, they fundamentally believe they are a massive burden to their company or their family. If a project fails at work, they are 100% convinced it's entirely their fault. They might even invent these huge catastrophic scenarios, agonizing over irrational fears like, what if my family has massive hidden debt? They develop this profound sense of sin, basically believing they have to make some massive personal sacrifice just to atone for even existing.
Ultimately, all of this pressure leads to a raw, terrifying thought process. This is the 9th symptom: suicidal ideation and repetitive thoughts of death. The exhaustion is so complete, the internal pressure is so overwhelming that the brain literally feels like it's melting. They look at the daily grind of simply existing and going to work and think, is this going to continue forever? And because the brain is so incredibly overloaded, death falsely and tragically starts to look like the only logical escape from the pain.
Okay, let's shift gears to part 4, the 3 diagnostic criteria, looking at the doctor's diagnosis. We're stepping out of the patient's internal despair now and into the objective viewpoint of a psychiatrist who is assessing those exact 9 symptoms we just went through. When a doctor is looking at a patient, the first major red flag they watch for is this sense of contradiction. The doctor is looking for a really jarring disconnect. See, the patient might be expressing the most devastating lack of self-worth, believing they're the most useless person on the planet, but their exterior? Completely numb. They're experiencing this profound, deep sadness, but their face and their body display absolutely zero emotional movement.
The second medical criterion is clinical inhibition, sometimes called retardation. And this is a fascinating behind-the-scenes look at what's actually happening neurologically. Internally, the patient's brain is firing off panic signals. They feel rushed, they feel anxious, they feel frantic. But to the doctor, sitting across from them, their physical body is acting like it's trapped in thick mud. Their speech is super awkward, their responses are delayed, and their physical movements are practically frozen.
Then we have the third and final diagnostic criterion, which really separates normal, everyday anxiety from a clinical illness: delusions. Now, these aren't just passing worries. These are persistent, highly unrealistic beliefs. Things like being hated by literally everyone you know or being on the absolute brink of complete financial ruin. And here is the clinical key. No matter how much objective evidence you present to the patient to prove they are loved or to show them they're financially totally fine, these punishing delusions absolutely will not leave their mind.
By comprehensively evaluating all 9 of those symptoms alongside these 3 strict medical criteria, and of course factoring in the patient's age and environment, doctors can make an official diagnosis. Which leads us to part 5, when to seek help and taking action.
First off, think about this number, 10%. It's estimated that 1 in 10 people will experience a depressive state in their lifetime. That's a huge number, and it proves that if you wake up, your body feels unexplainably heavy, and you start wondering, am I just not normal? You really need to know that you are far from alone. This is a highly common, well-documented medical condition. If you take absolutely anything away from this explainer today, please let it be this remarkably clear medical guideline. If you or a loved one find yourselves shedding tears without any logical trigger, if you are just crying for absolutely no reason at all, it is time. That is the ultimate benchmark to go out and seek professional medical help. I want to leave you with this thought today. We've seen how an illness can completely trick a person into believing they're fundamentally broken or guilty rather than just simply sick. It really begs the question, if our minds can so convincingly disguise a treatable medical condition as a massive personal failure, what other dark internal narratives are you accepting as facts right now? Stop accepting the guilt that your exhausted brain is feeding you. Challenge that narrative, reach out, and get the knowledge and support you truly deserve. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.